Hi everyone, welcome to Module 2. This is my video for the sort of introduction to Module 2, give you a little bit of an idea about what I'm looking for. Remember, your questions, your prospective questions should be based on the theoretical reading, right? The theoretical reading this week is from Breslin, and it's a great piece about the rise of China. The rise of China has been going on for a long time, right? At least since the 2000s, but the reason I say that I was an undergraduate from sort of 1999 to 2000 and, well, 2006 actually. I took like 3 years off in the middle. But um, the talk of at the time I remember from my from my classes there was the Pacific century, right? The 2000 the 21st century is going to be the Pacific century. Of course, we had Japan, and we have Japan there, and the United States, obviously, facing the Pacific. But China, right? The rise of China was a huge issue then, and it's continuing on today. By a huge issue, I mean there's a lot of interest in China. China's economy is growing very quickly. It's undergoing a lot of economic change. Its economic change is its economic system has been changing since about 1980. Away from a centrally planned economy to a much more liberal, open market economy. And I was going to say perhaps consequently, but certainly coincidentally, right, happening at the same time, its power and its wealth on the world stage is growing and increasing. If we're talking about military power, it has an aircraft carrier now, right? Its military capacity is significant. I mean, it was already a nuclear power, nuclear armed power, has been for quite a long time, for several decades. Yeah, China is very important. And we've been asking ourselves the questions for a long time, at least for 20 years, probably longer. Right, what sort of impact is China going to have on the international system? And so the reading, the Breslin reading, it's a little bit older, but it's certainly not from before 2000. The idea is of the Breslin article is, look, there's a lot of speculation, and there's some sort of a consensus growing when Breslin writes this. There's some sort of a consensus that China's growing power and influence is going to have a significant and dramatic impact on the global system. International institutions, if they survive, are going to have to be radically rewritten, radically changed. Alliance structures, economic structures, norms, laws, international laws and international norms are under threat, serious threat, because China's not the United States. China's not the United States, and it's not Western Europe. It has a different culture, it has different, not just culture, but it has a different goal. Right? It has a different strategy. It has a different outlook on world affairs. And as they become more powerful, they're going to demand dramatic and drastic and quick change in the international system to suit their own interests. Right? That's been sort of a growing consensus over time. Breslin comes in, and this piece should be thought of in that perspective. Right? He wants to stand up and tell everybody, hang on a minute. In fact, there's good reason to think that China's not going to demand dramatic, instant change. That yes, of course, they do have different interests, and those interests, they'll want them to be met more, but actually maybe their interests are not completely out of harmony with the interests of the United States or the rest of the global system. And so maybe they can be accommodated by slow, not particularly dramatic changes. Right? So we might not be entering a time of turbulence with the rise of China, but actually, and this is of course what China has been insisting for some time now, but actually quite a peaceful rise. And in that, remember, it's not like I was alive either, right? Remember the 19th century? No. Remember the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, when the United Kingdom, Great Britain, sort of passes off its hegemony, its leadership in the world to the United States. By 1945, after the Second World War, they're calling the Americans and saying, hey, could you take over down in the Eastern Mediterranean? We can't really deal with the Turkish civil war and the Greek civil war. We haven't got the resources anymore. Could you help us out there? Now the argument goes, right, that sort of the handover from the United Kingdom to the United States, those two states, those two nation states are, they share a lot of interests, right? China doesn't necessarily fit in that same box, but at least that's the consensus. But actually, Breslin is saying maybe they do. So I'll leave you to read that reading now. That's the focus of it. That's what you should be thinking about and asking yourself while you're doing it. What impact is China going to have? What reasons does Breslin have? What's his theory? What's the cause of this peaceful rise that he sees? Also, he details, right, the other side of the argument as well, which is good writing. But yeah, so ask yourself that, like, are you with Breslin or are you against Breslin? Is there any part of Breslin's arguments, any part of his support that he uses for his own theory that you have questions about? That's a good focus for your perspective questions.